8 months she'd moved through his house like a shadow. 8 months of listening, watching, planning. "What's your real name?" he asked. "Mara Volkov," she said. "I kept my married name even after my husband died. Thought it might bring me luck." A pause. "Turns out it did." "Volkov," Adrian repeated. The name was common enough in Russian communities, but still. "Related?" "Cousins, very distant, your grandfather's line." She turned back to the street. 50,000 in various currencies. Not much, but enough to run. Adrian stood in the middle of the tiny apartment, holding dry clothes, staring at a woman he'd never really seen before. "You were going to kill them," he said. It wasn't a question. Mara met his eyes. "Yes, poison in Irina's tea, a staged accident for Victor. I had 3 different plans, but then you came home early." A slight smile, cold as winter. "Sometimes luck is better than planning." She pulled out a laptop from beneath the couch. Another prepared resource. "By now, Victor's made the calls. Your captains will be confused, waiting for confirmation. He'll tell them you're delayed, buy himself another 12 hours before announcing the plane crash." Adrian sat across from her. Outside, rain continued to fall, blurring the city into abstract shapes. "He'll need to consolidate quickly," Adrian said, thinking out loud. "Move money, secure loyalties. Viktor Sokolov killed me, Mikhail. But dead men can still pull triggers. The question is, do you want to help me aim?" The rain hammered harder. In the distance, sirens wailed. Police or ambulance, impossible to tell. "Where are you?" Mikhail asked. "Somewhere safe, for now." "The Maid. They're saying you ran with a maid." Word traveled fast. Adrian glanced at Mara, who'd moved to the window, watching the street below. "Her name is Mara," Adrian said. "That gives them almost 24 hours to find us." "Yes." Adrian moved to stand beside her. 4 stories below, the street was empty except for rain. "We'll need to stay invisible until then." "I'm good at invisible," Mara said quietly. They stood in silence, watching the city that wanted them dead. Somewhere out there, Victor was consolidating power. Irina was planning her widow's performance. Soldiers were checking safe houses, calling in favors, hunting. "In the mansion," Adrian said, "when you grabbed my arm, you could have let them find me, could have watched from the shadows, while they put bullets in my skull. Why didn't you?" Mara turned from the window, meeting his eyes. "Because I've spent my whole life being invisible," she said. "Being nothing. And I'm tired of it. Your wife took my mother from me. Your organization spit us out like trash, but you—" She paused. "You said thank you. 3 times in 8 months. That's 3 times more than anyone else in that house. That's a low bar for loyalty." "It's not loyalty." Her voice hardened. "It's alliance. You need someone who knows how to move unseen, who knows this city's bones, who has nothing left to lose. I need someone with the skills and connections to destroy the people who destroyed my family." She extended her hand. "So yes, Mr. Volkov, I saved your life. And now you're going to help me take everything from the people who took everything from me." Adrian looked at her outstretched hand, small, calloused, steady. He took it. "Then we're agreed," he said. "We burn it all down. Together." "Together," Mara confirmed. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. The lights flickered, but held. Adrian released her hand and moved to the small couch, finally allowing exhaustion to touch him. His body ached, his mind raced. Somewhere in this city, his wife was sleeping peacefully, probably already spending his money in her mind. Victor was making calls, cementing power. They thought he was dead, they thought they'd won. But the night was long, and dead men made the best hunters. "Get some rest," Mara said, tossing him a blanket from the closet. "I'll take first watch. 4 hours, then we switch." Adrian caught the blanket. "You don't sleep?" "I sleep like a cat, light and ready." She settled into the chair by the window, the laptop open on her knees. "I've had a lot of practice staying alert in dangerous houses." Adrian lay back, the couch barely long enough for his frame. The blanket smelled clean, simple, nothing like the Egyptian cotton sheets in his mansion. His mansion, not anymore. "Mara," he said into the darkness. "Yes?" "Thank you." A pause, then softly, 4 times now. Despite everything, the betrayal, the bullets, the empire crumbling, Adrian felt something like a smile touch his lips. Outside, New York City continued its endless dance of light and shadow, prey and predator, power and ruin. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow they would step into the lion's den and make a deal with an old enemy. But tonight, in a tiny apartment in Hunts Point, a king learned what it meant to fall, and a maid learned what it felt like to rise. The rain continued to fall, washing away the old world, making space for whatever would come next. Dawn broke gray and cold over Hunts Point, light filtering through the dirty window like smoke. Adrian woke to the smell of coffee and the soft click of computer keys. Mara sat in the same position as when he'd fallen asleep, but she'd changed clothes again, different jeans, a worn leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. "You didn't sleep," he said, pushing himself upright. "I did. 2 hours." She didn't look up from the screen. "Enough. Coffee's on the counter. Black, no sugar. That's how you take it." Adrian stood, every muscle protesting. He found the cup she'd prepared, the coffee still hot. "You pay attention. It's what kept me alive in your house." She finally looked at him, dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze sharp. "Victor made his announcement an hour ago. You're officially dead. Plane went down 40 miles off the coast of Japan. Mechanical failure. No survivors." Adrian took a long drink of coffee, letting the bitter heat ground him. "He moved faster than I expected." "He had to. Your captains were getting nervous. 3 of them called your personal line overnight." She turned the laptop toward him. On the screen, a news article showed his official photograph, the one from the charity gala 2 years ago, him in a tuxedo, Irina on his arm, both smiling like they owned the world. Condolences are pouring in. The mayor's office released a statement. Even the FBI pretended to care. Adrian studied his own face on the screen. Dead at 42. That's what the world would remember. A businessman with rumored connections gone too soon, leaving behind a beautiful widow and an uncertain legacy. "Irina's performance?" he asked. Mara clicked to another tab. Security footage from what looked like the mansion's front entrance. Irina stood in black, surrounded by suited men, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other accepting flowers from someone off screen. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m. "She's been at it since sunrise," Mara said. "Receiving visitors, crying on cue. Victor's been by her side the whole time, playing the loyal friend supporting the grieving widow." Adrian watched his wife dab at dry eyes, saw Victor's hand on her shoulder, protective, comforting. The performance was flawless. "She should have been an actress," he said quietly. "She was. Is." Mara closed the laptop. "We have 16 hours until the meeting with Mikhail. That's 16 hours Victor has to find us, or 16 hours for this deal to fall apart. Mikhail won't back out. He needs this as much as we do." "Maybe, but he's also survived 20 years by being paranoid and careful. If Victor gets to him first..." "Victor doesn't know we contacted Mikhail. He thinks I'm dead and you're running scared." Adrian set down his coffee cup. "What's our biggest vulnerability right now?" Mara considered. "Movement. Every step we take outside this apartment puts us on cameras, in sightlines. Victor has the entire network looking. Police too, probably. Missing persons report on me. Maybe an APB. We need supplies, weapons. There's a pawn shop 6 blocks from here. Owner's ex-military, hates cops, takes cash only. I've bought from him before." She pulled on the oversized jacket. "I'll go. You stay here. Stay quiet. You're too recognizable." "Alone?" "I've been alone my whole life, Mr. Volkov. I know how to handle it." She checked a small pistol Adrian hadn't seen before, tucked it into her waistband. "Lock the door behind me. Don't answer for anyone. If someone tries to force entry, there's a fire escape outside the bathroom window. 3 buildings east, there's a basement entrance. Code is 4729. Wait there. I'll find you." She moved to the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "If I'm not back in 2 hours," she said, "assume I'm dead or caught. Take the cash behind the coffee, get out of the city. Go to Providence." "There's a name in the envelope, Stefan Kozlov, Dmitri's cousin. He owes me a favor. He'll get you across the border into Canada." "I'm not running to Canada." "Then you're an idiot." She pulled open the door. But you're an idiot who's paying me back for saving your life, so don't waste it doing something stupid while I'm gone. The door closed. 3 locks engaged from the outside. Adrian heard her footsteps descend the stairs, then silence. He stood alone in the tiny apartment, the dead man drinking coffee in a safe house that smelled like old radiators and survivor's guilt. Through the window, the city continued its morning rhythm. Trucks rumbling past, voices calling in languages from 6 different continents, the eternal soundtrack of New York waking up. Adrian moved to Mara's laptop, opening it. She'd left several tabs open, news articles about his death, Victor's social media, the man was actually posting condolences, the bastard, and a folder labeled simply Insurance. He clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files, audio recordings, photographs, bank statements, emails. Everything Mara had collected over 3 months of being invisible in his house. He selected an audio file at random, clicked play. Victor's voice filled the small room. Can't back out now. We're too deep. Adrian dies tomorrow, and we divide everything. You get your freedom, I get the empire. Clean split. Irina's laugh. You make it sound so simple. It is simple. 1 plane, 1 ocean, 1 dead husband. A pause. Unless you're having second thoughts. About Adrian? Ice in her voice. Please, I stopped loving him the day he married me. This is business, Victor. It's always been business. Adrian closed the file, opened another. This one was an email chain between Irina and a lawyer in the Caymans dated 6 months ago. Subject line, estate planning and offshore asset protection. He read through the emails, watching his wife systematically prepare to steal everything he'd built. She'd been thorough, patient. Every asset identified, every account targeted, every loose end documented, including Mara. One email, dated just 2 weeks ago. The maid has been asking questions about the nursing home accounts. Victor suggests we handle her after the primary event. Make it look like grief, perhaps. Suicide by someone who couldn't cope with the loss of her employer. Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. They'd planned Mara's death as casually as ordering groceries. He continued through the files. Mara had been building a case, not for the police were bought, but for leverage, for proof, for the moment when invisibility would no longer serve her purpose. 40 minutes passed, an hour. Adrian cleaned and reassembled the Glock he'd carried from the mansion, checked the ammunition count. 14 rounds. He had 14 chances to make this right. At the 90-minute mark, footsteps sounded in the stairwell. Not Mara's light tread. Heavier. 2 people, maybe 3. Adrian moved to the door, weapon ready, listened. The footsteps stopped 1 floor down. A door opened. Voices, muffled. Then the door closed and the footsteps retreated. He exhaled slowly, forced his heart rate down. The city was full of sounds, full of people. Not every footstep was a threat. At exactly 2 hours, 3 light taps on the door. A pause. 2 more taps. The pattern Mara had used when they entered last night. Adrian unlocked the door. Mara slipped inside, carrying 2 shopping bags and looking windblown but alive. She set the bags on the table, locked the door behind her. Any trouble? Adrian asked. None. The pawn shop owner barely looked at me. Paid cash. Left. She started unpacking. 2 burner phones, a box of ammunition, a compact tactical knife, energy bars, bottled water, a first aid kit with serious supplies, sutures, morphine, antibiotics. Also got these. She pulled out 2 hooded sweatshirts, both black, both sized for Adrian, and a box of hair dye. You're not dyeing your hair, Adrian said. Not me. You. She tossed him the box. Dark brown, almost black. Your gray hair makes you stand out. Every photo Victor's circulating shows that silver at your temples. We change it. You become harder to identify at a distance. Adrian caught the box, examined it. She was right, of course. His hair was distinctive, and in a city of millions, distinctive got you killed. Fine, but you're doing it. I'm not a stylist. Obviously. Mara pulled out the last item from the bag, a sleek tablet, still in its packaging. Encrypted. Untraceable. We'll need it for tonight. The afternoon crawled past in tense preparation. Mara dyed Adrian's hair in the cramped bathroom, her fingers efficient and clinical as she worked the color through. When she finished, he looked at himself in the mirror and saw a stranger, younger somehow, harder. "Better?" Mara said, rinsing her hands. "Now you just look like every other criminal in this city." "Comforting." They ate in silence, protein bars and water, the meal of people on the run. Adrian used the new tablet to check his old network, watching the pieces shift in real time. Victor was moving fast, consolidating. 3 captains had already sworn allegiance publicly. 2 others had gone silent, likely dead. "He's cleaning house," Adrian observed. "Anyone who might question the succession." Standard playbook. Mara sat cross-legged on the floor, the disassembled parts of her pistol spread before her. She cleaned each piece with practiced care. Kill the loyalists, promote the ambitious, create a new power structure before anyone realizes the old one is gone. "You've studied this." "I've lived it." She reassembled the weapon with quick, precise movements. "My father was military. Before he died, he taught me that power isn't about strength. It's about timing and information." She slid a magazine into place. "You had the power. They had the timing. Now we need to reclaim both." Night fell gradually, the city's light pollution turning the sky orange and purple. At 10 p.m., they prepared to move. Adrian in jeans and one of the black hoodies, Mara in dark tactical clothing she'd had stashed in the apartment. Both armed, both silent. "Red Hook is 40 minutes by subway," Mara said, checking her watch. "We take the 6 to the L, transfer twice more. Stay in different cars. If one of us gets spotted, the other keeps moving. We should stay together. We should maximize chances of at least one of us making it." She looked at him directly. "This isn't partnership built on sentiment, Mr. Volkov. This is survival. If I go down, you complete the deal with Mikhail. If you go down, I find another way to destroy Victor and Irina. Understood?" Adrian understood. This was the language he'd spoken for 15 years. Cold calculation, emotion subordinate to strategy. Except now he was on the other side of it, being managed by a woman who'd learned survival in his own house. "Understood," he said. They left the apartment separately. Mara first, disappearing into the night like smoke. Adrian followed 5 minutes later, hood up, hands in pockets, just another shadow in a city built from them. The subway was half empty, the late-night crowd of shift workers and insomniacs scattered across the car. Adrian took a seat near the rear door, kept his head down, watched reflections in the darkened windows. At the third stop, a group of men entered. 4 of them, leather jackets and attitude, scanning the car with predatory interest. Adrian recognized the type, low-level muscle, probably working for one of the gangs that operated in the gray spaces between the major organizations. One of them locked eyes with Adrian's reflection, frowned, said something to his companions. Adrian stood smoothly as the train slowed for the next station, moved toward the exit. The doors opened and he stepped onto the platform, merged with a cluster of commuters heading for the stairs. Behind him, the 4 men followed. Adrian didn't run. Running attracted attention, turned heads, created memory. Instead, he walked with purpose up the stairs, into the transfer corridor, following signs toward the L train. The corridor was long, tiled, smelling of urine and old humanity. Halfway down, Adrian glanced back. The 4 men had split up, 2 following directly, 2 taking a parallel corridor. They were hurting him. At the far end of the corridor, the platform opened up. A train was pulling away, its lights disappearing into the tunnel. The next one wouldn't arrive for 8 minutes, according to the digital sign. Adrian had maybe 30 seconds before the confrontation became inevitable. He turned left, away from the platform, toward the station's service area. A door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" stood slightly ajar. He pushed through. Inside was a maintenance corridor, bare concrete, fluorescent lights, the smell of electrical equipment and rat poison. Adrian moved quickly, found another door, tried the handle. Locked. Footsteps echoed behind him. The 4 men entered the corridor, no longer pretending this was coincidence. "Hey," the largest one called. "You look familiar." Adrian turned to face them, calculating angles and options. 4 against 1. In closed space. No witnesses. If he drew the Glock, he'd have to kill all of them, and gunshots in a subway station brought police fast. "I don't think so," Adrian said, keeping his voice neutral. "Yeah, you do." The man pulled out a phone, glanced at the screen. Got a bulletin from uptown. Missing person. Wife's looking for her husband. He showed the screen to his companions. 50 grand reward. Dead or alive. Victor had put a bounty on him. Smart. Turn every small-time criminal in the city into a hunting dog. You've got the wrong person, Adrian said. Sure we do. The man put away his phone, pulled out a knife instead. Which is why you're coming with us. We'll let the lady decide if it's the right face. The other three spread out, blocking any retreat. Adrian measured distances, grip positions, attack vectors. He'd trained for this kind of encounter, had run scenarios in gyms and back alleys. But training was different from reality, and reality involved 4 armed men who'd probably done this before. The large man lunged first, knife leading. Adrian sidestepped, grabbed the extended wrist, and drove his elbow into the man's throat. The knife clattered to the concrete as the man dropped, choking. The second attacker came from the left. Adrian ducked under a wild swing, came up inside the man's guard, and drove 2 quick punches into his solar plexus. The man folded. 3 and 4 attacked together. Adrian blocked one, took a glancing blow from the other that sent pain exploding through his ribs. He spun, kicked the closer man's knee, heard it pop, then grabbed the 4th man's jacket and threw him headfirst into the concrete wall. 15 seconds, 4 men down. Adrian stood breathing hard, ribs screaming, knuckles split. The large man was still conscious, still trying to breathe. Adrian picked up the fallen knife, crouched beside him. Who sent the bulletin? Adrian asked quietly. The man shook his head, eyes watering. Adrian pressed the knife's tip against the man's cheek, just enough to draw blood. Who? Everyone, the man gasped. Came through on all the underground channels. Every crew got the message. 50 grand for Adrian Volkov. Picture's a few years old, but close enough. Where were you supposed to take me? Safe house in Queens, numbers on the bulletin. The man coughed, spat blood. That's all I know, man, I swear. Adrian studied him, judged the truth, then struck him in the temple with the knife's handle. The man went limp. Adrian stood, dropped the knife, and walked back into the corridor. No alarms yet. No police. The city's casual violence absorbed incidents like this every night, processed them into statistics, and moved on. He emerged onto a different platform, caught a train heading toward Brooklyn, sat in a corner seat, hood pulled low, and felt the adrenaline slowly drain into exhausted clarity. Victor had weaponized the entire criminal underground. Every hustler, every gang, every desperate soul in debt now had financial incentive to find Adrian Volkov. 50,000 was life-changing money for people living on margins. The city had become a cage filled with hungry predators. Adrian checked his burner phone. One text from an unknown number. Delayed. Taking alternate route. Proceed to meeting. I'll be there. Mara had run into trouble too. The train rattled through darkness, lights flickering. Adrian watched his reflection in the window. A stranger with dark hair and haunted eyes. A dead man riding the subway to make a deal with an old enemy. Red Hook emerged from the darkness like a forgotten dream. The old brewery sat near the waterfront, a massive brick building that had once produced beer for half the city. Now it stood empty, windows broken, covered in graffiti and the scars of abandonment. Adrian approached from the south, staying in shadows, watching for movement. The area was industrial, mostly deserted at this hour. Perfect place for a meeting. Also perfect place for an ambush. At 5 minutes to midnight, a black SUV pulled up to the brewery's loading dock. 4 men emerged, followed by a 5th figure, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the confidence of someone who owned the ground he walked on. Mikhail Petrov. Adrian had seen him before, at a distance, during the territorial negotiations that had prevented open war. Up close, Mikhail looked like what he was, a man who'd clawed his way up from the docks through sheer brutality and strategic intelligence. Scarred face, gray beard, eyes that missed nothing. Adrian stepped out of the shadows, hands visible, empty. Mikhail's men immediately drew weapons, pistols, and submachine guns, all pointed at Adrian's chest. Hold, Mikhail said quietly. His voice carried weight. The weapons stayed up, but fingers moved off triggers. Adrian Volkov, you look different with dark hair. Felt like a change. I imagine so. Death will do that. Mikhail lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face. Where's the maid? Coming. Ran into complications. Complications. Mikhail took a drag, exhaled smoke into the cold night air. Victor put a bounty on your head. 50,000. Every thug in the city's looking for you. That's significant complications. Victor's afraid. Victor's smart. He knows you're the only threat to his consolidation. Mikhail gestured to the brewery entrance. Inside, we have privacy there. The building's interior was exactly what Adrian expected. Gutted, graffitied, home to rats and memories. Mikhail's men set up portable lights, creating a circle of illumination in the vast darkness. You offered me half your empire, Mikhail said, getting straight to business. Everything north of Harlem, Russian connections, territory and infrastructure, in exchange for helping you destroy Viktor Sokolov. Yes. That's a generous offer, which makes me wonder what's wrong with it. Mikhail flicked ash onto the concrete floor. Victor's consolidated quickly. By tomorrow, he'll have complete control of your network. Your captains are falling in line. Your resources are being redistributed. What makes you think you can take any of it back? Because Victor made one critical mistake, a voice said from the darkness. Mara stepped into the light, appearing like she'd materialized from shadows. Her jacket was torn, blood on her face, but her eyes were clear and her weapon was steady in her hand. Mikhail's men immediately raised their guns again. Mara didn't flinch. Lower them, Mikhail said, studying her. You're late. Ran into 8 of Victor's men on the L train. Had to convince them to let me pass. She moved to stand beside Adrian. Victor's mistake was leaving witnesses who understand how his mind works. You're the maid. I was the maid. Now I'm the person who knows where Victor buried every secret, hid every dollar, and made every deal he doesn't want exposed. Mara pulled out a USB drive from her jacket. This contains audio recordings, financial statements, and video evidence of Viktor Sokolov ordering murders, laundering money, and planning Adrian's assassination. It's enough to bring down his entire operation. Mikhail took the drive, turned it over in his scarred fingers. Why give this to me? Because information without enforcement is worthless, Mara said. You have the soldiers, you have the infrastructure outside Victor's control. You have everything we need to turn this evidence into action. And what do you get? Revenge, Mara said simply. Against Victor and Irina both. They killed my mother. They tried to kill me. I want them destroyed completely. No prison, no exile, just gone. Mikhail looked between them. The fallen king and the vengeful maid, both bloody, both desperate, both absolutely serious. You understand what you're asking, Mikhail said. Open war. Victor has 200 soldiers minimum, maybe more by tomorrow. My organization is strong, but not invincible. People will die. People are already dying, Adrian said. Victor's cleaning house, eliminating anyone who might question his authority. You think he'll stop at my empire? He's already moving on your territory. Give him 6 months and he'll control everything from Boston to Philadelphia. The question isn't whether there'll be war. The question is whether you fight now, when you have allies and leverage, or later, when you're alone. Mikhail smoked in silence, weighing futures. Around them, the brewery creaked and settled, old bones in the darkness. Half the empire, Mikhail finally said. Everything north of Harlem. Full operational control, no interference from you. Agreed, Adrian said, and Victor's head, literally. I want proof when it's done. You'll have it. Mikhail extended his hand. Adrian took it. The handshake lasted 3 seconds, long enough to seal a pact, short enough to acknowledge the fragility of trust between old enemies. My men will need 48 hours to mobilize, Mikhail said. We hit Victor's primary location simultaneously, the docks, the casinos, the safe houses. We cut off his resources and force him into a defensive position. He'll retreat to the mansion, Mara said. It's defensible, secure. He'll consolidate there and wait for reinforcements. Then we make sure reinforcements never arrive. Mikhail crushed out his cigarette. I have contacts in the NYPD. Not many, but enough. We can lock down the area, make it a siege. Irina will be there too, Adrian said quietly. Your wife's fate is your business. I have no interest in her beyond neutralizing her as a threat. Mikhail checked his watch. It's late. You need somewhere secure to wait out the next 2 days. I have a safe house in Brighton Beach. Old Soviet construction. Walls like bunkers. Don't appreciate anything yet. Mikhail's eyes were hard. This alliance ends the moment Victor's dead. After that, we're back to being what we've always been, competitors. The line gets drawn at Harlem, and neither of us crosses it, ever. Break that agreement, and I'll put you in the ground myself. Clear? Clear, Adrian said. Mikhail nodded to his men. They lowered their weapons, started packing up the lights. Sergei will take you to the safe house, Mikhail said, gesturing to one of his lieutenants. Stay there. Stay quiet. When it's time to move, I'll send word. He turned to leave, then paused. Adrian, he said without looking back, Victor should have killed you when he had the chance. It's the first rule. If you're going to betray the king, make sure he's actually dead. He glanced over his shoulder. Don't make the same mistake with him. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing through the empty brewery, leaving Adrian and Mara alone with Sergei and 2 other guards. Come, Sergei said in a thick accent. Car is outside. They followed him into the night. The SUV was warm, expensive, smelling of leather and gun oil. Mara sat beside Adrian in the back seat, finally allowing exhaustion to show on her face. 8 men? Adrian asked quietly. 6. I exaggerated for effect. She touched her split lip gingerly. But they were serious, had my photo. Orders to bring me in alive. Victor wants to know what you know. What I know could fill a library. She leaned her head back against the seat. But what I can prove, that's what terrifies him. The drive to Brighton Beach took 30 minutes through empty streets. The safe house was exactly as Mikhail described. An old apartment building that looked like every other building in the neighborhood, but with reinforced doors and guards stationed discreetly at key positions. Inside, the apartment was sparse but functional. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, bars on the windows. Sergei showed them the weapons cache hidden in the bathroom wall, the emergency exits through the basement, the radio frequency to call for backup. You need anything? You call, he said, leaving a contact number. Otherwise, stay inside. Don't go to windows. Don't order food. Don't exist. He left them alone. The locks engaged with heavy clicks. Adrian moved through the apartment, checking sight lines and security measures. Mara went straight to the kitchen, found instant coffee, started boiling water. 48 hours, she said, her back to him. Then we go to war. Yes. Victor will know we're alive by then. We'll know we've allied with Mikhail. He'll prepare. He'll try. Adrian joined her in the kitchen. But preparation requires time and clear thinking. We'll make sure he has neither. Mara poured hot water over coffee grounds, the smell filling the small space. She made 2 cups, handed one to Adrian. In your mansion, she said, I used to listen to you make calls. You were always calm, always controlled. Even when dealing with threats, you never raised your voice. Emotion is weakness in negotiation. Is it weakness now? She met his eyes. When it's personal? Adrian considered the question. 48 hours ago, he'd been at the top of his world, powerful, secure, untouchable. Now he was drinking instant coffee in a safe house, planning war against the people who'd shared his home and his trust. No, he said finally. Now it's fuel. Mara nodded slowly. Good, because I need you burning, not cold. Cold makes you cautious. Burning makes you dangerous. She moved to one of the bedrooms, paused at the doorway. Get some sleep, Mr. Volkov. Real sleep this time. In 2 days, we're going to tear down everything Victor's built. I want you sharp when we do it. The door closed. Adrian stood alone in the kitchen, coffee cup warming his hands, looking at his reflection in the darkened window. Somewhere in this city, Victor was sleeping in Adrian's bed, making plans in Adrian's study, giving orders with Adrian's authority. Irina was counting money that should have been Adrian's, planning a future that didn't include the man she'd promised to honor. They thought the game was over, thought the king was dead and the kingdom was theirs. But kingdoms aren't built on thrones and crowns. They're built on will and ruthlessness, on the ability to survive betrayal and return stronger. Adrian finished his coffee, set the cup in the sink, and went to the second bedroom. The bed was hard, the room cold, but he lay down and let exhaustion finally take him. His last thought before sleep was simple and sharp as a blade. In 48 hours, Victor and Irina would learn what happened when you failed to kill a king completely. They would learn it in fire and blood and screaming regret, and Adrian Volkov would make absolutely certain they had plenty of time to understand their mistake before the end came. The dreams came in fragments. Irina's laugh echoing through marble halls, Victor's hand on his shoulder turning into a knife in his back, the mansion burning while he stood paralyzed, watching everything he'd built turn to ash. Adrian woke with a start, covered in sweat, the afternoon sun cutting harsh lines through the barred window. He checked his watch. 4 p.m. He'd slept nearly 12 hours. Voices drifted from the main room, Mara speaking in rapid Russian, someone responding in the same language. Adrian grabbed the Glock from beneath his pillow and moved silently to the door. Through the crack, he saw Mara sitting at the kitchen table across from Sergei. Between them lay maps, photographs, and what looked like building schematics. She was pointing at something on one of the maps, her expression intense. "The East Wing has minimal coverage," she was saying in perfect, unaccented Russian. 3 cameras, but they're on a loop system. 12-minute cycles. If you time it right, you can move through that corridor completely unseen. Sergei nodded, making notes. And the security detail rotation? Every 6 hours. Change happens at 6 a.m., noon, 6 p.m., and midnight. The handoff takes approximately 8 minutes. That's when they're most vulnerable. Old guards are tired. New guards are still getting oriented. Adrian pushed open the door. Both looked up. "You speak Russian," he said to Mara. "Fluently. Also Ukrainian, Polish, and enough Mandarin to order dinner." She gestured to the empty chair. "Sergei brought intel. We've been cross-referencing with what I know about the mansion's security." Adrian sat, studying the materials spread across the table. Satellite photos of his estate, guard rotation schedules, camera placements. Someone had done extensive reconnaissance. "Mikhail's been watching your house for 2 years," Sergei explained. "In case opportunity presented, we have full layout, security protocols, even service schedules." "Thorough," Adrian said. "Necessary." Sergei pulled out another document, a personnel list. "Victor's made changes. Replaced your inner security team with his own people. 40 men total, all loyal to him. Plus Irina's private security, another 12. 52 hostiles inside the mansion," Mara said, "plus roving patrols in the grounds. Maybe 70 total." Adrian studied the numbers. In a straight assault, even with Mikhail's forces, they'd be looking at significant casualties. Victor had turned the mansion into a fortress. "He's expecting an attack," Adrian observed. "Of course he is." Sergei lit a cigarette, offered the pack. Adrian declined. "Word on street is he knows you're alive, not confirmed, but suspected. He's locked down everything, called in every favor, put guns at every entrance." "How did he find out?" "The subway," Mara said quietly. "The men you fought. One of them must have gotten word out before passing out. Description matched you enough that Victor started preparing." Adrian felt the tactical situation shifting. If Victor knew he was alive, knew an attack was coming, the element of surprise was gone. This would be a siege, not a raid. "Mikhail's plan?" he asked Sergei. "Hit hard, hit everywhere. Draw out Victor's forces, spread them thin, then concentrate on the mansion." Sergei stubbed out his cigarette, half-smoked. "But Mikhail wants your input. You know Victor's thinking. How will he respond?" Adrian closed his eyes, visualizing the battlefield. Victor was smart, trained, paranoid. He'd anticipate a frontal assault, would prepare defenses accordingly. But Victor also had a weakness: arrogance. He'd spent 15 years as second in command, always believing he was smarter than everyone else. That arrogance created blind spots. "Victor will expect us to hit his supply lines first," Adrian said, opening his eyes. "Cut off reinforcements, isolate the mansion. Standard siege tactics. So he'll over-defend the periphery and assume the mansion itself is impenetrable." "And if we do the opposite?" Mara asked, following his logic. "If we hit the mansion first, hard and fast, while simultaneously cutting his lines of communication," Adrian traced a route on the map. "He'll be trapped inside with no way to call for backup. His outer forces will be scattered, confused, leaderless." Sergei frowned. "That's high risk. If we commit to the mansion and fail to breach quickly, we're exposed." "We won't fail." Adrian looked at Mara. Because we're not going through the front door. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The tunnels. What tunnels? Sergei demanded. Mara pulled the mansion schematic closer, pointing to the basement level. The service tunnels I used to get Adrian out. They run beneath the entire estate, connecting to the old bootlegger network. Victor doesn't know about them. They're not on any modern blueprints. You're certain? I watched him order a complete security audit 3 months ago. They swept every inch of the house, every camera, every sensor. But they never went below the basement level. As far as Victor knows, there's just foundation down there. Mara's smile was cold. He has no idea there's an entire underground highway beneath his feet. Sergei studied the schematic, calculating. How many men can move through these tunnels? Single file, maybe 2 abreast in the wider sections. Call it 20 men maximum before you risk exposure. Mara traced the tunnel routes with her finger. But 20 men coming up inside the mansion while Victor's forces are focused outward, that's enough to create chaos. More than enough, Adrian agreed. We come up in the old wine cellar. It's isolated, rarely used. From there, it's 30 feet to the main staircase. We take that. We control the vertical movement through the entire house. Sergei pulled out his phone, started typing rapidly. I need to tell Mikhail. This changes the operational plan completely. While Sergei made calls in clipped Russian, Adrian stood and moved to the window. Through the bars, Brighton Beach sprawled, a slice of old Soviet Union transplanted to American soil. Signs in Cyrillic, women in headscarves, men smoking on stoops. A world within a world. Mara joined him, standing close enough that he could smell gun oil and the cheap shampoo from the safe house. You're thinking about her, she said quietly. Who? Irina. Whether you can actually do it when the moment comes. Adrian watched an old woman cross the street below, carrying shopping bags that looked too heavy for her frame. I've killed before. For business, for territory, for survival. It's never been personal. And now it is. Now it is. He turned to face her. Does that bother you? Mara considered the question. My mother died alone in a county hospital because your wife decided she wasn't worth the money to keep alive. 3 weeks of suffering, calling for me, and I couldn't even afford to miss work to be there because Irina threatened to fire me if I took time off. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes burned. So no, Mr. Volkov, it doesn't bother me. I'll pull the trigger myself if you can't. Sergei ended his call, turned to them. Mikhail approves the plan. We move tomorrow night, 2200 hours. That's fast, Adrian said. Has to be. Victor's consolidating. Every hour we wait, he gets stronger. Sergei checked his weapon, a well-maintained pistol that had seen serious use. Mikhail's mobilizing everyone. 60 men for the assault team, another 40 for perimeter control and communications disruption. He's also calling in markers with the police. We'll have a 1-hour window where emergency response will be mysteriously delayed. And after that hour? After that, we're on our own, which means we need to be done and gone before the cavalry arrives. Sergei holstered his weapon. Mikhail wants you both at the warehouse by 2000 hours tomorrow. Final briefing, equipment distribution, synchronization. He moved toward the door, paused. Adrian, one more thing. Mikhail says if you want to back out, now is the time. Once we commit, there's no stopping. People will die. Maybe us. Definitely them. You need to be certain. Adrian thought about Irina's laugh as she planned his murder. Victor's hand on her shoulder, protective and possessive. The casual way they'd discussed killing Mara like she was nothing. I'm certain, he said. Sergei nodded once and left. The locks engaged behind him. Alone again, Adrian and Mara stood in the apartment that smelled like old radiators and borrowed time. Outside, the afternoon was fading toward evening, the city preparing for another night of endless movement and silent violence. 24 hours, Mara said. Then it's over, one way or another. You should leave, Adrian told her. You've done enough. Saved my life, provided the intel, made the connections. Take the money from your apartment and disappear. Start over somewhere Victor and Irina can never reach. She laughed, sharp and humorless. And miss watching them pay? Not a chance. Oh, you could die tomorrow. I could die today. Could have died 1,000 times in the last 8 months. Invisible in that house, One wrong word away from ending up in the river. She moved to the kitchen, started making coffee with mechanical efficiency. Death stopped scaring me when my mother took her last breath while I was scrubbing your wife's bathroom floor. What scares me now is living with regret, living with the knowledge that I had a chance for justice, and I ran. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. Mara pulled down 2 cups, her movements precise. Besides, she continued, you need me. I know that house better than anyone. Know the rhythms, the blind spots, the places where sound carries and where it dies. Without me, you're just another armed force trying to break a defended position. She poured coffee, handed him a cup. With me, you're a scalpel cutting straight to the heart. Adrian accepted the coffee, recognizing the truth in her words. Mara had spent 8 months being invisible, which meant 8 months of observation, learning, mapping every detail of his house. She'd turned servitude into reconnaissance, survival into preparation. Tell me about the wine cellar exit, he said. Exact layout. Mara pulled out a notebook from her jacket, worn, filled with small, precise handwriting and sketches. She flipped to a page showing a detailed map of the mansion's lower levels. The tunnel exits here, she said, pointing, behind a false wall of wine racks. It's operated by a mechanical lever disguised as a bottle slot. The cellar itself is maybe 30 by 40 feet, stone floor, one entrance through a heavy wooden door. Security? One camera covering the entrance, but it's old. Black and white, no audio. Guard patrols pass by once every 90 minutes during standard rotations. Victor will have increased patrols. Probably every 30 minutes now, maybe more. Mara traced the route from cellar to staircase. We'll need to move fast once we're up. Take the door, neutralize anyone in the corridor, secure the staircase within 90 seconds, or we lose the advantage. They spent the next hour going over details, entry points, fallback positions, fields of fire. Mara's knowledge was encyclopedic. She knew which floorboards creaked, which doors stuck, which corridors amplified sound. Every detail absorbed during months of invisible service. As evening darkened into night, they ate. Canned soup heated on the stove, bread that was a day past fresh. The meal of soldiers before battle. How did you learn Russian? Adrian asked, breaking the comfortable silence. My mother, she was from Moscow originally, came over in the 90s. Spoke it at home until the day she died. Mara dunked bread in her soup. The other languages I picked up working service jobs. Hotels, restaurants, private households. You learn fast when your tips depend on understanding what people want before they ask. And the tactical knowledge? The weapons handling? She was quiet for a moment, soup cooling in her bowl. My father, like I said, before he died, he taught me things. How to read people, how to defend myself, how to turn environment into advantage. She looked up. He was military intelligence before he defected. Said the best weapon isn't the gun, it's information and timing. Smart man. Smart enough to know when to run, not smart enough to avoid the people who followed. She resumed eating. He died when I was 14. Car accident, officially, but we both know what that means in our world. Adrian understood. The old Soviet intelligence apparatus had long arms and longer memories. Defectors lived on borrowed time, always looking over their shoulders. So you learned to be invisible, he said. I learned to survive. Invisibility was just the best tool available. Mara finished her soup, stood to wash the bowl. Tomorrow I won't be invisible. Tomorrow I'm going to be the most visible person in that mansion, and I'm going to make sure Victor and Irina see me clearly before the end. The night passed slowly. Adrian cleaned weapons while Mara studied maps and guard rotations, both of them preparing with the focus of people who understood that details meant the difference between living and dying. Around midnight, Sergei returned with equipment, body armor, tactical clothing, extra ammunition, communication devices. Mikhail wants you to check these, he said, setting down 2 silenced pistols. Custom work, subsonic rounds, minimal flash. Good for close quarters when you need quiet. Adrian examined the weapons. Quality craftsmanship, perfect balance. He field stripped one, checked the action, reassembled it in under 30 seconds. They'll do, he said. Sergei also brought updated intelligence. Victor moved his base of operations to the main study. 2nd floor, east wing. He's sleeping there too, has a cot set up. Paranoid about being caught in the bedroom. Smart, Mara observed. The study has multiple exits and reinforced doors, better defensive position. Makes it harder to reach him, Adrian countered. Or easier. Mara traced the floor plan. If everyone knows that's where he is, that's where the defenses concentrate. The rest of the house becomes secondary priority. She's right, Sergei said. Our reconnaissance shows most of the security focused on the second floor east wing. The rest is standard patrols. They talked through scenarios until 3 a.m., when Sergei finally left them alone again. Adrian tried to sleep, but his mind kept churning through tactical problems and personal questions. Somewhere in that house, Victor was probably doing the same. Two chess players imagining the moves ahead, each trying to anticipate the other's strategy. Morning came gray and cold. Adrian woke to find Mara already up, doing exercises in the main room, push-ups, stretches, movement drills, preparing her body the same way she'd prepared her mind. "What time?" she asked without stopping. 7:30. "Good. 12.5 hours until we move." They spent the day in quiet preparation. Adrian wrote out account numbers and access codes, insurance, in case things went wrong. Mara organized equipment with military precision. Neither spoke much. There was nothing left to say. At 6 p.m., they dressed in the tactical gear Sergei had provided: black fatigues, body armor, boots with sound-dampening soles. Adrian strapped on the Glock and the silenced pistol. Mara did the same, adding a tactical knife to her belt. They stood in the small apartment, armed and armored, looking like what they'd become, soldiers preparing for war. "You ready?" Adrian asked. Mara checked her weapons one final time, her movements calm and methodical. "I've been ready for 8 months. Let's go finish this." Sergei arrived at 7:45 in an unmarked van. They rode through the darkening city in silence, passing through neighborhoods that shifted from residential to industrial as they approached the waterfront. The warehouse sat in a cluster of similar buildings, anonymous and perfect for what Mikhail had planned. Inside, the space had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered the walls showing the mansion and surrounding area in tactical detail. 60 men stood in small groups, checking weapons and gear. These were Mikhail's best, hardened soldiers who'd survived turf wars and police raids, who understood urban combat and close-quarters violence. Mikhail stood at the center, orchestrating with the calm authority of a general who'd fought this kind of battle before. He looked up as Adrian and Mara entered. "Good, you're here." He gestured them forward. "We go over the plan one final time. Everyone needs to understand their role." The next hour was pure military briefing. Mikhail laid out the operation with precision, the diversion team that would hit Victor's outer locations, drawing forces away from the mansion, the communications team that would jam signals and block emergency calls, the assault team that would use the tunnels to penetrate the mansion's defenses. Adrian and Mara would lead the tunnel team, 20 fighters moving underground to emerge inside the enemy's stronghold. Mikhail himself would command the exterior forces, maintaining pressure and preventing escape. "Timing is everything," Mikhail emphasized, pointing at synchronized watches distributed to each team leader. "The diversion starts at 2200 hours exactly. That gives you 20 minutes to move through the tunnels and position at the cellar exit. At 22:20, you breach. At that exact moment, we hit the perimeter hard. Victor's forces will be caught between internal and external assault." "And if Victor tries to run?" someone asked. "He won't," Adrian said with certainty. "Victor spent his entire life building toward this moment. He'll defend what he's taken because surrendering means losing everything. He'll fight to the end." "Then we make sure the end comes quickly." Mikhail checked his watch. 1 hour to position. Final equipment check. No phones. No unnecessary communication. Once we move, we're dark until it's over. The warehouse filled with the sounds of final preparation. Magazines being loaded, armor being adjusted, whispered conversations in Russian and English. These men knew the stakes. Some would die tonight. All of them had made peace with that possibility. Mara stood beside Adrian, her face composed but her hands moving constantly, checking her weapons, adjusting her gear, channeling nervous energy into productive action. "Second thoughts?" Adrian asked quietly. "None. You?" "Just one." "What's that?" Adrian looked at the maps, the armed men, the carefully planned assault on his own home. "I built that house, chose every stone, every fixture. Walked those halls for 15 years thinking they were mine. And now? Now they're just walls, just another battlefield. He turned to her. Everything I thought was permanent was just borrowed time. The only thing that's real is what you build that can't be taken. Trust, loyalty, purpose. Mara studied him in the harsh warehouse lighting. You're building that now. With Mikhail, with me, with every person in this room who chose to stand with you. I'm building revenge. Revenge is just the foundation. She adjusted her body armor a final time. What you build on top of it, that's what matters. Mikhail called out, Team leaders, positions. We move in 10 minutes. The warehouse erupted in controlled motion. Teams formed, checked each other's equipment with the familiarity of professional soldiers. Adrian's tunnel team gathered, 19 hard-faced men and Mara, each armed with silenced weapons and ready for close-quarters combat. Listen up, Adrian addressed them, voice carrying authority he'd spent 15 years cultivating. We're going into a defended position with superior numbers. Our advantage is surprise and intimate knowledge of terrain. Follow Mara's lead on navigation. Follow mine on engagement. Stay tight, stay quiet, stay alive. Questions? None. These were professionals who understood the job. Sergei approached with a radio headset. For you, encrypted, short range, you'll be able to coordinate with Mikhail once you're inside. Adrian fitted the device, tested it. Mikhail's voice came through clear. Tunnel team, confirm. Confirmed, Adrian responded. Good hunting. The teams moved out in stages. The diversion group first, heading to their targets across the city. Then the perimeter force, taking up positions around the estate. Finally, at 9:40 p.m., Adrian's team loaded into 3 vans that would take them to the tunnel entrance 3 blocks from the mansion. The ride was silent except for the city sounds filtering through the van walls. Adrian watched Mara across the darkened interior. She'd pulled her hair back severely, her face stripped of anything soft. She looked like what she was, a weapon with a purpose, honed sharp and ready to cut. The van stopped in an alley behind an abandoned factory. Everyone out, moving quickly. Sergei led them to a rusted metal door set into a concrete wall, another entrance to the tunnel network that ran beneath the old estates. This is it, Sergei said, producing a key. Tunnel runs straight for 2 blocks, then branches. Mara knows the route from there. The door opened onto darkness and the smell of earth and decay. Mara clicked on a tactical light, the beam cutting through absolute black. Stay close, she said, and stepped into the dark. They descended single file, 21 people moving through tunnels built a century ago by criminals who understood the value of invisible paths. The walls dripped with condensation, rats scattered from their lights. The air tasted of mold and forgotten things. Mara navigated without hesitation, taking turns that all looked identical to Adrian but clearly meant something to her internal map. She'd walked these tunnels during her planning, had memorized every branch and landmark, 20 minutes of silent movement through the underground maze. Then Mara held up a fist. Stop. Everyone froze. She pointed ahead where the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, the junction point beneath Adrian's estate. From here, multiple passages led to different parts of the mansion's basement. Wine cellar is through there, Mara whispered, indicating the left passage. 200 yards, straight shot. Adrian checked his watch. 9:58. 22 minutes until the assault began. Position at the cellar entrance, he ordered quietly. No breach until my signal. They moved forward, boots silent on ancient concrete. The passage narrowed, forcing them into single file again. Adrian could feel the weight of his house above them. All those rooms where he'd lived and loved and been betrayed, all that history pressing down through stone and earth. The passage ended at a brick wall. Mara stepped forward, ran her hands across the surface, found what she was looking for, a brick that sat slightly recessed from the others. She pressed it. A section of wall swung inward silently, well-oiled hinges moving without sound. Beyond was the wine cellar, exactly as Mara had described. Racks of expensive bottles, stone floor, dim lighting from a single bulb. And no guards. Adrian signaled the team forward. They filed into the cellar, spreading out, weapons trained on the single door that led to the main basement corridor. Through his headset, Adrian heard Mikhail's voice. All teams in position. Diversion starts in 3, 2, 1. In the distance, barely audible through the thick walls, an explosion rumbled, then another, the diversion team hitting Victor's outer locations. Adrian counted seconds, waited for the moment when Victor's attention would be completely focused outward, when every guard would be looking toward the external threat. His watch hit 10:20 p.m. exactly. "Breach," he said quietly. The cellar door opened. Adrian moved through first, weapon up, scanning the corridor. Empty. The explosion sounds were louder here, and he could hear shouting from the upper levels, Victor's people responding to the assault. "Move!" he commanded. 21 fighters poured into his mansion's basement, ghosts rising from beneath the foundation to reclaim what had been stolen. They moved toward the main staircase with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role. At the stairs, Adrian paused. Above, he could hear running footsteps, shouted orders, the controlled chaos of a defended position under attack. Victor was up there somewhere, commanding his forces, believing his fortress was impregnable. He was about to learn otherwise. Adrian started climbing, Mara beside him, 19 armed soldiers behind them. They rose through the levels of his own house like a tide of retribution, silent and unstoppable. The war for the mansion had begun, and Adrian Volkov was finally coming home. The ground floor corridor stretched before them, marble gleaming under crystal chandeliers that Adrian had chosen himself 3 years ago. Now those same lights illuminated his return as an invader in his own home. 2 guards rounded the corner ahead, weapons drawn, faces focused on the external chaos. They saw Adrian's team a half-second too late. Mara fired twice, suppressed shots that sounded like sharp coughs. Both guards dropped without a sound. "Drag them into the study," Adrian ordered. 2 of his fighters complied, pulling the bodies out of sight while the rest of the team advanced. Through his headset, Mikhail's voice. "Perimeter teams engaging. Heavy resistance at the front gate. They're burning through ammunition fast." "Keep the pressure," Adrian responded. "We're moving to the second floor." They reached the grand staircase, the centerpiece of the mansion, sweeping marble steps that curved upward beneath a painted ceiling depicting angels and clouds. Irina had commissioned that ceiling, had spent $200,000 on an artist from Florence. Adrian had never understood the appeal. Now, moving up those stairs with armed soldiers, he saw it for what it was, excess masquerading as culture, money pretending to be meaning. At the landing, Mara held up her fist again. Voices drifted from the second floor, Victor barking orders, men responding with military precision. The study was close now, maybe 30 feet down the east wing corridor. Adrian signaled half the team to hold position at the stairs, maintaining their line of retreat. The other half would push forward with him. Mara stayed at his shoulder, her weapon tracking smoothly as they moved. The east wing corridor was exactly as Adrian remembered. Persian runners over hardwood floors, original art on the walls, sconces providing warm ambient light. He'd walked this path 10,000 times, usually heading to his own study to work late into the night. Now each step felt surreal, like moving through a memory that had turned hostile. A guard stepped out of a side room, radio to his ear. He saw Adrian's group and his eyes went wide. "Intrude!" Mara put 2 rounds in his chest before he could finish the word. The guard fell back into the room he'd emerged from. Adrian moved past without looking down, focused on the heavy oak door at the corridor's end. Victor's temporary command center. Gunfire erupted from the far end of the hallway, 3 guards emerging from the main bedroom suite, weapons blazing. Adrian's team returned fire, the corridor filling with the sharp crack of unsuppressed shots mixing with the cough of silenced weapons. One of Adrian's fighters went down, blood spreading across his tactical vest. Another dragged him back toward cover. "Suppressing fire!" Adrian shouted, and his people opened up, forcing Victor's guards to duck back into the bedroom. "Mara, with me!" They ran low and fast while their teammates provided cover, reaching an alcove 10 feet from the study door. The shooting continued behind them, controlled bursts, tactical discipline, professionals doing professional work. Adrian tried the study door, locked, reinforced. He could hear movement inside, furniture being moved, orders being given. "They're barricading," Mara said. "Then we make a new door." Adrian pulled a breaching charge from his tactical vest, one of the tools Sergei had provided. He affixed it to the lock mechanism, set the timer for 5 seconds, and moved back. The explosion was sharper than expected. blowing the door inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Adrian went through the opening before the debris settled, weapon up, scanning for targets. The study looked like a war room, maps on every wall, laptops open, radio equipment scattered across Adrian's antique desk. And in the center, behind an overturned conference table used as a barricade, stood Viktor Sokolov. He looked different than Adrian remembered. Harder, leaner, with the focused intensity of a man who'd stopped pretending to be second best. His weapon was already raised, already firing. Adrian threw himself sideways as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. He rolled behind a heavy bookcase, came up returning fire. Viktor ducked, and the room erupted in chaos. Mara came through the door low, took cover behind the desk, and started picking off the 4 guards who'd barricaded with Viktor. Her shots were precise, methodical. 1 guard down, then another, each kill executed with mechanical efficiency. Viktor was screaming into a radio. "All units to the study! They're inside the house! I repeat, hostiles inside!" Adrian put 3 rounds into the radio equipment, silencing the call. Sparks flew as electronics shattered. "It's over, Viktor!" Adrian shouted over the gunfire. "Your perimeter's collapsing. Your reinforcements aren't coming. Surrender now and I'll make it quick." Viktor's laugh was wild, unhinged. "Quick? You think I'm afraid of dying, Adrian? I've been preparing for this my whole life." He fired blindly over the barricade, forcing Adrian to stay down. 15 years I watched you build this empire. 15 years knowing I could do it better, faster, smarter. And I was right. Look at how fast everything fell into my hands. "You didn't build anything," Adrian called back. "You stole what I created and called it conquest. But stolen kingdoms don't last, Viktor. Ask anyone who's tried." More of Adrian's team poured into the study, overwhelming the defenders with superior numbers. The remaining guards went down under concentrated fire. Now it was just Viktor behind his makeshift barricade, alone and trapped. "Come out," Adrian said, standing. "Face me like you should have from the beginning." Silence. Then Viktor rose slowly, weapon in hand but pointed at the floor. His face was flushed, eyes bright with something between rage and exhilaration. "You really came back from the dead," he said, almost admiring. "I thought for sure the plane, the ocean." "I was never on the plane, Viktor. I came home early, heard everything." Adrian kept his weapon trained on his former friend's chest. "Your plan, Irina's betrayal, the whole performance." Viktor's expression shifted, calculation replacing bravado. "Then you know why. You know what you became, Adrian, comfortable, soft, obsessed with legitimacy and respectability. You lost the edge that built this empire. So you decided to take it. I decided to save it." Viktor's grip tightened on his weapon. "Another 5 years of your leadership and we'd have been absorbed by the bigger organizations. You were making us weak, Adrian. I did what needed to be done. You murdered your brother. I killed a king who'd forgotten how to rule." Viktor's weapon started to rise. "And I'd do it Mara shot him. The sound was almost gentle, a suppressed round that entered Viktor's shoulder and spun him sideways. His weapon clattered to the floor. He grabbed at the wound, blood pouring between his fingers, shock replacing the fervor in his eyes. "That's for my mother," Mara said coldly, stepping forward. "For every person your ambition crushed. For thinking you could plan my death like it was nothing." Viktor slumped against the wall, sliding down to a sitting position. "The Maid," he gasped, recognition finally dawning. You were always there, watching." "Always," Mara confirmed. "And you never saw me. None of you did. That was your first mistake." Adrian moved closer, standing over the man who'd been his friend, his second, his betrayer. Viktor looked smaller now, diminished by pain and failure. "Where's Irina?" Adrian asked. Viktor laughed wetly, blood on his teeth. "You think I'm telling you anything? You're going to kill me anyway." Yes, but I can make it matter, or I can make it meaningless. Your choice." Viktor met his eyes, and in that moment Adrian saw the truth. Viktor had always been competing, always measuring himself against the king, always wanting to prove he was better. Even now, bleeding out, he was still trying to win. "Master bedroom," Viktor said finally. "She's locked in with her personal security, thinks she's safe there until this blows over." A bitter smile. "Tell her I said she never loved either of us. Just the power." Adrian nodded once. "Mara." She raised her weapon. Victor closed his eyes. The shot was clean, final. 15 years of friendship and betrayal ending in a converted study surrounded by stolen maps and broken equipment. Adrian felt nothing, no satisfaction, no regret, just the cold acknowledgement that one threat was neutralized and another remained. Team status, he said into his headset. Mikhail's voice came back immediately. Perimeter secured. 32 hostiles down, 8 surrendered. We're mopping up the grounds now. How's the interior? Victor's dead. Moving on the master bedroom now. Irina's barricaded with security detail. Need support? Negative. We've got this. Adrian surveyed his team. 2 wounded, 1 seriously, but the rest combat ready. Secure the ground floor and make sure no one gets out. Understood. And Adrian, we've got maybe 20 minutes before police response gets too heavy to ignore. Whatever you're doing, do it fast. Adrian led his team back into the corridor. The guard positions they'd fought past earlier were now secured by his people, bodies removed, defensive positions established. They moved quickly toward the mansion's west wing, where the master bedroom dominated an entire corner of the second floor. The bedroom where he'd slept beside Irina for 12 years, where they'd shared mornings and secrets, where she'd kissed him goodbye before he left for Tokyo 3 days ago, where she'd probably celebrated with Victor the moment the door closed behind him. The hallway leading to the bedroom was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Adrian held up a fist, stopping the team. Mara, what's the approach? She studied the corridor, her expression troubled. There should be guards. Irina never went anywhere without at least 2 of her security detail in visual range. Maybe they abandoned her when they heard Victor was dead. Maybe, but Mara didn't sound convinced. Or maybe it's a trap. Adrian moved forward cautiously, weapon sweeping corners. The bedroom door stood closed, light showing beneath it. He could hear voices inside, Irina giving orders, men responding. At least 4 people, maybe more. Irina, Adrian called. It's over. Victor's dead. The house is taken. There's nowhere to go. The voices inside went silent. Then Irina's voice, clear and controlled even through the heavy door. Adrian, so the rumors were true. You really are alive. Disappointed? A pause. Impressed, actually. I didn't think you had it in you to survive what we planned. Clearly, I underestimated you. You underestimated the maid you fired. Another pause, longer this time. Mara, of course. The invisible little mouse. Irina's voice hardened. I should have killed her when I had the chance. You tried. Failed. Adrian signaled his team to position for breach. Open the door, Irina. Come out. We'll make this clean. Clean? Irina laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Nothing about this is clean, Adrian. You built an empire on blood and you're shocked when it demands more blood? Don't pretend to be righteous now. I'm not pretending anything. I know what I am. Question is, do you? I know exactly what I am. A woman who was sold to you like property by my father to settle his debts, who spent 12 years playing the perfect wife while you built your kingdom and barely noticed I existed. You want to know what I am, Adrian? I'm free. Finally, completely free. Adrian felt something twist in his chest. Not love, that had died the moment he heard her planning his murder, but recognition, perhaps. The acknowledgement that he'd been so focused on building his empire that he'd never questioned what it cost the people trapped inside it. You could have asked for a divorce, he said, and lose everything, the money, the status, the security. Irina's voice dripped contempt. You don't divorce men like you, Adrian. You survive them. And when opportunity presents itself, you take it. Victor was your opportunity. Victor was an ambitious fool who thought he loved me, easy to manipulate. Easy to aim, a sound like furniture moving. But useful, I'll admit. He did the hard work while I prepared to enjoy the rewards. Those rewards are gone now. Everything you planned, everything you stole, it's over. Is it? Irina's voice changed, became almost playful. You're standing outside my door with guns, playing at justice. But you haven't thought this through, have you? I've thought it through fine. Have you? Because I'm in here with 5 armed men who are very loyal and very well paid. You try to breach this door, we'll cut you down before you cross the threshold. You wait outside, eventually the police will arrive, and we'll all have very interesting conversations about what happened here tonight. Either way, Adrian, you lose. Adrian looked at Mara, who was studying the door with tactical focus. She made a small gesture, pointed to the walls, then to herself, then held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes. She had a plan. You're right, Adrian said loudly. This is a stalemate, so let's talk terms. Terms? Irina sounded amused. What terms could you possibly offer that I'd accept? Safe passage. You and your security walk out of here alive. I keep the house. You keep your life. Clean separation. Irina laughed. And I'm supposed to trust you? The man whose empire I tried to steal, whose death I planned? Adrian, even you aren't that naive. While she talked, Mara had moved silently down the corridor to a service access panel. She pried it open, disappeared inside. 2 of Adrian's team followed her. Then what do you want? Adrian asked, keeping Irina engaged. We can't stay here forever. I want what I've always wanted, freedom and security. Give me 20 million in clean currency, transportation to the airport, and 12 hours head start. After that, we never see each other again. 20 million. A bargain considering what I was going to take. Think of it as a divorce settlement. Papers rustled. I have the account numbers ready. Transfer the money, I'll confirm receipt, and we walk away. Everyone lives. You get your house back, I get my freedom. Simple. Adrian checked his watch. Mara had been gone 90 seconds. Whatever she was doing, she needed more time. That's a lot of money to wire in the middle of a firefight, he said. You're Adrian Volkov. You've made bigger transfers during business dinners. Irina's voice was confident now, sensing advantage. 10 minutes, Adrian. That's all it takes. 10 minutes and this ends without more blood. And if I refuse? Then we wait for the police and you explain why you assaulted your own home with a private army. Explain the bodies downstairs. Explain Victor's corpse in your study. I'm the grieving widow whose husband was killed by his former boss in some criminal dispute. You're the violent criminal whose empire is collapsing. Who do you think the authorities will believe? She had a point. Mikhail's arrangement with the police would only hold for so long. Every minute that passed brought official response closer. And while Adrian had money and connections, Irina was right. The optics favored her narrative. A soft click came through his earpiece. Mara's voice, barely audible. In position, on your signal. Adrian smiled coldly at the door. You make a compelling argument, Irina. You always were good with words. It's one of my few talents you actually noticed. I noticed more than you think. I noticed how you never asked about my work, never wanted to know details. Content to spend the money, but afraid of where it came from. Why would I ask? You wouldn't have told me anyway. You kept that world sealed away, separate from your home life. As if you could compartmentalize violence like it was just another business expense. Maybe I was protecting you. Maybe you were protecting yourself from seeing what your choices cost. Irina's voice went quiet. But we're past that now. Transfer the money, Adrian. Let's both walk away from the ruins. Adrian looked at his team, hard men who'd fought their way through his mansion, who'd killed and bled for this moment. He thought about Victor lying dead in the study, about Mara somewhere in the walls, positioning for whatever move she'd planned, about the empire he'd built and lost and was taking back piece by bloody piece. No, he said simply. What? No deal, no money, no passage. You planned my death, Irina. You laughed while doing it, traded 12 years of marriage for offshore accounts and freedom. Adrian's voice was flat, final. So here's my counteroffer. Come out now, face what you've done, or stay in there until the bullets start flying. Your choice. Silence. Then Irina's voice, all the playfulness gone, replaced by pure venom. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than me? You've killed dozens of people for money and power, and you judge me for wanting the same thing? I judge you for betrayal, for lying beside me every night while planning how to destroy me, for being willing to kill an innocent woman just to tie up loose ends. Innocent? Irina spat. Your precious maid was stealing information, documenting everything, preparing to blackmail us all. She's no more innocent than any of us. She's also standing right behind you, Mara's voice said. The bedroom erupted in chaos, gunfire, screaming, the sound of furniture crashing. Adrian kicked the door, reinforced but not designed to withstand tactical boots driven by adrenaline and rage. It held on the first kick, the second. On the third, the frame splintered and the door crashed inward. Adrian went through weapon first into pandemonium. Mara had come through a wall panel that connected to the bedroom's walk-in closet, emerging behind Irina's defensive position. Two of Irina's guards were already down, taken by surprise. The remaining three had turned to face this new threat, giving Adrian's team the opening they needed. The firefight lasted maybe 10 seconds. Brutal, close-quarters violence in a room filled with silk and gold. When it ended, all 5 of Irina's security detail lay dead or dying, and the bedroom Adrian had shared with his wife looked like an abattoir. Irina stood in the center of the destruction, untouched, frozen in shock. She wore a designer dress, pearls at her throat, her hair perfect despite the chaos. Even now, she looked like she belonged in a magazine spread rather than a war zone. "Hello, Irina," Mara said, stepping over a body. "Remember me? The furniture you forgot to notice?" Irina's eyes focused on Mara, recognition and hatred warring in her expression. "You pathetic little—" Mara hit her. Not a slap, a full punch that snapped Irina's head sideways and sent her stumbling into the wall. Blood trickled from her split lip, shocking red against porcelain skin. "That's for my mother," Mara said. "For every order you gave that made her life harder. For the nursing home you threw her out of. For thinking people like us were disposable." Irina touched her lip, looked at the blood on her fingers with disbelief. "Adrian," she said, turning to him, "are you going to let your servant assault me?" "She's not my servant, she's my partner." Adrian moved closer, studying the woman he'd been married to. "And you're not my wife, you're just someone I was stupid enough to trust." "Trust?" Irina laughed bitterly. "You trusted your empire more than you ever trusted me. Your deals, your territory, your reputation, that's what you loved. I was just an accessory, a pretty face to bring to charity galas. You could have left, any time. And go where? Do what? I was 23 when we married, Adrian. 23, with no education, and a father who'd already spent my future settling his gambling debts. You think I had choices? You think I wanted this life?" She gestured at the room, the bodies, the blood. "I made the best of what I was given, just like you did." "The best?" Mara's voice was cold. "You killed people. Not in self-defense, not in some territorial war. You killed them because it was convenient, because they were in your way." "Welcome to the world your boss built," Irina shot back. "You think Adrian's hands are clean? Ask him how many people died so he could build this empire. Ask him about the families destroyed, the lives ruined. At least I'm honest about what I am. He pretends to be something better." Adrian felt the accusation land because it was true. He'd built his empire on violence and exploitation, had climbed to power over the bodies of rivals and obstacles. He'd told himself it was business, necessary, the way of the world. But standing in his bedroom, surrounded by corpses, looking at the woman who'd learned those lessons too well, he couldn't pretend anymore. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm not better than you. I taught you these rules, showed you how the game is played. But there's one difference, Irina." "What's that?" "I'm the one still holding the gun." Irina's composure finally cracked. Fear showed through, raw and real. "Adrian, please. We can still make a deal. Half of what I asked. 10 million. 5. Anything. Just let me walk away." "Like you were going to let me walk away? Like you were going to let Mara walk away?" Adrian shook his head. "No deals, no mercy. You wanted to play at the highest level, Irina. This is what that level costs." Tears started down her face, carving lines through perfect makeup. "I'm your wife. We stood before witnesses and swore vows you never meant. That makes it worse, not better." Adrian looked at Mara. "Your call. You've earned this more than anyone." Mara raised her weapon, pointed it at Irina's chest. The room went absolutely silent except for Irina's ragged breathing. "Please," Irina whispered. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about your mother, about everything. I was just trying to survive." "We were all trying to survive," Mara said. "The difference is some of us didn't destroy innocent people to do it." The shot echoed in the confined space, sharp and final. Irina fell without grace, landing in a heap of designer fabric and broken dreams. The pearls at her throat scattered across the floor like tears. Adrian stood looking down at the woman he'd married, feeling nothing. The relationship had been a business arrangement that both parties had honored until one side decided to break the contract. Now the contract was terminated, permanently. "Team, report," he said into his headset, turning away from the body. "Ground floor secured," came the response. "All hostiles neutralized or surrendered. Minimal friendly casualties." "Perimeter?" Mikhail's voice, clear, but we've got police sirens closing in. 5 minutes maximum before they arrive in force. Time to leave. Adrian nodded to his team. "Exfil protocol. Everyone out through the tunnels. Move." His fighters began their retreat, organized and professional even in departure. Adrian turned to Mara, who was still staring at Irina's body. "You all right?" he asked. "I thought I'd feel different. Satisfied, maybe. Or guilty." She looked up at him. "I just feel tired." "That's because revenge is just closing a door. It doesn't open new ones." Philosophical for a crime lord. Former crime lord. Adrian moved toward the exit. "Half this territory is Mikhail's now. The rest is fragmented, vulnerable. It'll take months to rebuild, if it's even possible." They walked through the mansion's corridors, passing the evidence of their assault. Bullet holes in walls Adrian had carefully chosen, blood on floors he'd walked every day, bodies of men who'd worked for him, or betrayed him, or simply been in the wrong place at the wrong moment. The house felt different now, violated. No longer a home, if it ever really had been. In the study, Victor's body lay where it had fallen. Adrian paused, looking at the man who'd been his friend and his Judas. There should have been more to say, more to feel, but there was just emptiness and the recognition that trust was the most dangerous weapon anyone could wield. They descended to the basement, following the retreat route. Behind them, the mansion stood silent and damaged, a monument to ambition and betrayal. By the time police arrived, it would be empty, except for bodies and questions. The tunnel swallowed them back into darkness. Adrian took one last look at the house before Mara closed the false wall behind them. Somewhere above, sirens were growing louder, help arriving too late to matter. They moved through the underground maze, joining the stream of fighters heading back to extraction points. At the junction where passages branched toward different parts of the city, Mikhail waited with Sergei. "It's done?" Mikhail asked. "It's done," Adrian confirmed. "Victor and Irina both. The house is yours to claim whatever's left." The price was agreed, half the empire. Mikhail gestured to the tunnels leading north. "That half is mine now. We're square. Until we're not." "Until we're not," Mikhail agreed with a slight smile. "But for now, we're not enemies. That's enough." He extended his hand. Adrian shook it, sealing the new order. The empire he'd built was divided, but he was alive. That was more than he'd had 3 days ago. "Go," Mikhail said. "Get out of the city for a while. Let the dust settle. When you come back, we'll talk about boundaries and business like civilized criminals." Adrian nodded. He and Mara joined Sergei's group, following tunnels that led toward Brighton Beach and the safe houses waiting there. Behind them, the sounds of the city at night filtered down. Sirens and shouts and the eternal rhythm of New York processing violence into tomorrow's headlines. They emerged in an alley behind a Russian bakery, the smell of bread mixing with the tunnel's dampness. A car was waiting, engine running. Sergei held the door open. "Where to?" he asked. Adrian looked at Mara. She looked back, and in her eyes he saw the same question, the same exhaustion, the same recognition that they'd crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. "Somewhere quiet," Adrian said. "Somewhere we can think." They drove through the city as dawn began to break, gray light washing away the night's darkness. Adrian watched the neighborhoods pass, the places he'd controlled, the streets where his word had been law, the empire now divided and diminished. But he was alive. Mara was alive. And the people who'd betrayed them were dead. It wasn't victory in any traditional sense, more like survival with consequences, justice with costs, revenge that solved nothing but at least provided closure. The car headed toward the horizon where the city met the sky, carrying two people who'd lost everything and gained each other, heading into an uncertain future built on the ruins of the past. Behind them, the mansion stood empty in the morning light. waiting for the police and investigators and lawyers who would try to make sense of the night's violence. They'd fail, of course. Some stories were too complex for official reports, too tangled in betrayal and retribution to fit neat narratives. But Adrian Volkov knew the truth, knew it in his bones, in his scars, in the weight of the weapon he still carried. The night he wasn't supposed to return had become the night everything changed. The king had died and been reborn, harder and colder. The invisible Maid had become visible and dangerous, and the empire that had seemed unshakable had shattered into pieces that could never be fully reassembled. That was the price of power built on sand. Eventually the tide comes in, and everyone drowns. The safe house in Connecticut was nothing like the mansion, a modest cabin on 12 acres of wooded land surrounded by silence instead of city noise. Sergei had driven them there as the sun rose fully over New York, leaving behind the smoke and sirens and the bodies that would fuel news cycles for weeks. Adrian stood on the cabin's small porch, coffee in hand, watching morning light filter through pine trees. Behind him, through the open door, he could hear Mara moving around inside, unpacking the minimal supplies they'd grabbed, setting up the secure laptop, already planning next moves because that's what survivors did. "News is calling it a gang war," she said, stepping outside with her own cup. "Territorial dispute between rival organizations. 12 dead, including prominent businessman Adrian Volkov's wife and chief lieutenant. Police are investigating." "Let them investigate." Adrian took a drink of bitter coffee. "They won't find anything that matters. Mikhail's people cleaned the scene. By the time forensics is done, it'll be unsolvable. Your name is everywhere. Questions about your disappearance, speculation about your involvement." Mara leaned against the porch railing. "Some outlets are already connecting you to organized crime. Your legitimate businesses are going to suffer." They were always a front anyway. Pretty lies to make ugly money look clean. Adrian watched a deer move through the distant trees, graceful and unbothered by human chaos. "The question is what we do now, where we go from here." Mara was quiet for a moment, steam rising from her coffee into the cold morning air. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." Adrian said it honestly, surprising himself. "For 15 years I knew exactly what I wanted. More territory, more power, more control. Now I've got half of what I built, an alliance with an old enemy, and no idea if any of it was worth what it cost." "Was it worth it?" Mara asked. "Before the betrayal, before everything fell apart. Did the empire make you happy?" Adrian considered the question. Had he been happy? He'd been successful, feared, respected in certain circles and despised in others. He'd had money and influence and the power to shape outcomes. But happy? "I was satisfied," he said finally. "Satisfied isn't the same as happy, but it felt close enough. And now? Now I'm alive. That's better than the alternative Victor planned." Mara nodded slowly. "My mother used to say that surviving isn't the same as living, that you could be breathing and still be dead inside." She looked at him directly. "Is that what we're doing, Adrian? Just surviving?" Before he could answer, her laptop chimed from inside. She went to check it, came back with her expression troubled. "Mikhail sent a message. There's a memorial service being planned for you. Public event. Your business associates, city officials, people from your legitimate operations, they're organizing it for 3 days from now." Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. A memorial. While I'm still alive. They think you're dead. The official story is you died in the mansion attack, caught in crossfire. Mara showed him the laptop screen, a news article with his photo, the headline reading, "Businessman Dies in Home Invasion." Mikhail's people are feeding that narrative. It gives you cover, gives them plausible deniability. And if I stay dead, then you're free. No more empire, no more obligations. You take whatever money you've got hidden away, disappear somewhere warm, and spend the rest of your life being nobody. Mara's voice was neutral, but Adrian heard the unspoken question underneath. He thought about it. Genuine freedom, the kind that came from erasure rather than power. No more looking over his shoulder for the next betrayal. No more balancing accounts and alliances and the constant pressure of maintaining control. It sounded peaceful. It sounded like surrender. "Or?" he asked. "Or you show up at your own memorial." Mara smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Walk in while everyone's mourning you. Reveal that you're alive, that you survived the betrayal, that you took back what was stolen. Make a statement that Adrian Volkov doesn't die easily. That would cause chaos. That would cause terror among your enemies, among anyone who thought they could move on your territory while you were gone. Mara closed the laptop. It's a power play, the ultimate dominance move. But it's also a commitment. Once you do that, you can't go back to being dead. You're all in on rebuilding. Adrian looked out at the peaceful woods, the quiet cabin, the simple life that was within reach if he just stayed silent. Then he thought about Victor's arrogance, Irina's contempt, the casual way they'd planned to erase him. Set it up, he said. Contact Mikhail. Tell him I'm coming to the memorial. Mara studied him. You're sure? I'm sure I'm not finished yet. Everything else, he shrugged. I'll figure it out as I go. The next 2 days were preparation. Mikhail sent information. The memorial was being held at the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, organized by Adrian's legitimate business partners and attended by everyone who'd ever worked with or against him. 500 people expected, including politicians, businessmen, and the press. It's perfect, Mara said, reading through the details. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. You walk in there and every person in that room will know that crossing Adrian Volkov has consequences. Some of them helped Victor, Adrian noted. Some of them knew about the betrayal and said nothing. Which is why this is important. You're not just announcing you're alive. You're announcing that you know exactly who stood with you and who didn't. Mara pulled up a list of confirmed attendees. These 12 names, they're Victor's people. They switched allegiance the moment he took over. They'll be the most shocked when you appear. Adrian memorized the names, the faces. Later, when the dust settled, there would be reckonings. Not immediate violence, he'd learned that lesson, but slow, strategic consequences for everyone who'd chosen the wrong side. Mikhail visited on the second day, arriving in an armored SUV with minimal security, a gesture of trust, or at least mutual interest. You're really doing this, he said, accepting whiskey in the cabin's small living room. I'm really doing this. It's bold, possibly stupid, definitely entertaining. Mikhail raised his glass. To audacity, then, and to hoping it doesn't get you killed immediately afterward. They drank. Adrian poured another round. What's the arrangement after? Mikhail asked. You reclaim your half of the empire. We maintain the dividing line at Harlem. We continue our separate operations. But what about the people who serve both of us? What about the businesses that cross boundaries? We negotiate. Like civilized criminals, as you said. Adrian sat across from him. I'm not looking to restart a war, Mikhail. I want stability. I want to rebuild what I lost without constantly watching for knives in the dark. Then you'll need different people. The ones who betrayed you once will do it again, given opportunity. Mikhail gestured toward Mara, who was working on the laptop across the room. You're building a new inner circle. Her, obviously. Who else? I don't know yet. I need people who value loyalty over ambition. That's harder to find than it sounds. It's impossible to find, actually. Everyone has ambition. The trick is aligning their ambition with your success. Mikhail finished his whiskey. I have someone who might interest you. Former military intelligence. Got out clean before things went bad in Moscow. She's been working for me on analysis and strategy. Smart, ruthless when necessary, and absolutely uninterested in running anything herself. She got a name? Katya Volkova. Distant relation to you, actually. Same family tree, different branch, Mikhail stood. I'll make the introduction after your dramatic resurrection. See if you're still alive to need staff. He left with the same minimal ceremony he'd arrived with. Through the window, Adrian watched the SUV disappear down the dirt road, leaving only dust and the sound of wind through pine trees. You trust him? Mara asked, joining Adrian at the window. As much as I trust anyone now, which is to say, not completely, but enough to work with. Adrian turned to face her. What about you? After this? After the memorial, what do you want? Mara was quiet for a long moment. I want what I've never had. Security, purpose, the knowledge that I'm not invisible anymore, that I matter beyond what I can provide for someone else. She met his eyes. I want to build something that can't be taken away by someone else's whim. That's what I wanted too. Didn't work out so well. Because you built it alone, surrounded by people who were only there for what they could take. Mara moved closer. What if we built differently? Not a hierarchy with one king at the top, but a partnership. Equal stakes, equal say, equal risk. Adrian had never considered such an arrangement. His entire life had been about climbing to the top, being the unquestioned authority. The idea of genuine partnership, of shared power, it was foreign and slightly terrifying. It was also appealing. A partnership, he repeated. In business and in everything, Mara finished. Business, strategy, survival. I'm not asking to be your wife, Adrian. I'm asking to be your equal, your partner in rebuilding what was lost and creating something new from the ruins. She extended her hand, the same gesture she'd made in the apartment in Hunts Point when they'd first made their alliance. Adrian looked at her hand, at the woman who'd saved his life, and stood beside him through violence and revelation. She was right. The old model had failed because it was built on hierarchy and hidden resentment. Maybe a new model required something different. He took her hand. Partners, then. Equal shares, equal voice. We build this together or not at all. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine for the first time since he'd known her. Together, then. Starting with your dramatic reappearance. The day of the memorial arrived with cold clarity. They drove into the city separately, Mara first, blending into the crowd of attendees, watching and reporting. Adrian followed 2 hours later, timing his arrival for maximum effect. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom was exactly as Adrian expected, opulent, overdone, filled with people who'd come to pay respects to a man most of them had barely known. He watched from a service corridor as the memorial began, viewing the proceedings on a tablet linked to Mara's hidden camera. The room was packed. 500 people in formal wear, standing beneath crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. At the front, a large photograph of Adrian, the same charity gala photo that had been used in news articles, sat surrounded by flowers. A succession of speakers took the podium, business partners praising his acumen, philanthropic organizations thanking his generosity, politicians offering condolences while carefully avoiding any mention of his actual work. All the appropriate lies told at funerals for complicated men. Then Victor's second-in-command, a man named Alexei, who'd switched allegiance immediately after the coup, took the podium. He spoke about Adrian's legacy, his vision, his contributions to the community. Every word rang hollow because every word was a performance by a man who'd betrayed him. It's almost time, Mara's voice came through Adrian's earpiece. Alexei's wrapping up. After him, they're opening the floor for final remarks before the reception. Adrian straightened his tie, custom-tailored, perfectly fitted, the armor of respectability. He wore a dark suit that made him look like he belonged in boardrooms rather than battlefields. His hair, still dyed dark, was styled professionally. He looked different than his memorial photo, but unmistakably himself. He moved through the service corridors toward the ballroom's main entrance, his footsteps silent on carpeted floors. Security at the event was minimal. After all, who threatens a memorial service? He passed 2 guards who barely glanced at him, another man in a suit among hundreds. At the ballroom entrance, he paused. Through the open doors, he could see the assembled crowd, the photograph of his supposedly dead self, the flowers and ceremony and careful lies. This was the moment, the point of no return. He thought about the peaceful cabin in Connecticut, the quiet life that was still available if he turned around. Thought about Irina's accusation that he loved his empire more than anything else, that power was his only genuine relationship. Maybe she'd been right, or maybe he was about to prove her wrong by building something different. Adrian stepped through the doors into the ballroom. For a moment, no one noticed. He was just another late arrival, another mourner seeking a seat. Then someone near the back turned, saw him, and went absolutely still. The stillness spread like a wave as more people recognized the man who was supposed to be dead walking calmly down the center aisle. A woman gasped. Someone dropped a glass, the sound of shattering crystal cutting through the stunned silence. At the podium, Alexei looked up from his notes, saw Adrian, and went pale. Adrian kept walking, his pace measured and unhurried, giving everyone time to process what they were seeing. The crowd parted like water, people stepping back as if he were radioactive. By the time he reached the front of the room, absolute silence had descended. He turned to face the assembled crowd, 500 people staring at him like he was a ghost made flesh. Thank you all for coming, Adrian said, his voice calm and conversational. I'm touched by the turnout. Really, I am. It's good to know so many people cared enough to attend my funeral. He paused. Or at least what they thought was my funeral. Alexei had retreated from the podium, his face a mask of terror. Adrian moved to take his place, standing in front of the microphone. I'm sure you have questions, Adrian continued, like how I'm alive, where I've been, what happened at my home 2 nights ago. He let the silence stretch. The short version is, I was betrayed by people I trusted. They planned my death, staged an accident, and moved to take everything I'd built. What they didn't plan for was me surviving, and what they definitely didn't plan for was me coming back. Movement in the crowd, people trying to leave, finding the exits blocked by Mikhail's security personnel who'd positioned themselves strategically. No one was leaving until Adrian was finished. Viktor Sokolov is dead, Adrian said flatly. So is Irina Volkov. So are the people who helped them. That chapter is closed, but other chapters remain open. His eyes scanned the crowd, stopping on specific faces, the 12 names Mara had identified as turncoats. Some of you made choices during my absence, chose to work with the people who betrayed me, chose to switch allegiance quickly and conveniently. The 12 faces had gone white. One man near the middle started to speak, thought better of it. I'm not here for revenge, Adrian continued. I'm here to make something very clear. Adrian Volkov doesn't die easily. The empire I built isn't gone. It's reorganized, restructured, and now operated in partnership with Mikhail Petrov. He gestured to where Mikhail stood near the back, a slight smile on his scarred face. We've divided territory, established boundaries, and created a new order in this city. Those of you who want to work within that order are welcome. Those who don't, he let the sentence hang. A hand went up in the crowd. Adrian nodded acknowledgement. Are we in danger? A woman asked, her voice shaking slightly. Those of us who worked with Viktor, are you going to kill us? That depends entirely on what you do next, Adrian said. If you return to your positions, do your jobs, and operate with the understanding that loyalty matters, you're fine. If you decide to make trouble, to test boundaries, to believe that this new arrangement is weak, he shrugged, then we'll have problems, and problems get solved. More silence. Adrian could feel the fear in the room, could sense the recalculation happening in 500 minds simultaneously. Some of these people would become enemies. Others would fall in line. A few would disappear quietly, leaving the city entirely. That was fine. He didn't need everyone. He just needed people to understand that the rules had changed. One more thing, Adrian said. I'm introducing someone who will be working with me going forward. Some of you saw her in my home as staff. That was a cover. Her real role is now my partner, equal authority, equal voice in all operations. He gestured to the crowd. Mara stood from her seat near the middle, moved forward with confidence that marked her as entirely different from the invisible maid she'd pretended to be. She joined Adrian at the podium, her presence commanding attention. This is Mara Volkov, Adrian said. From this point forward, any business conducted with me is conducted with her as well. Any orders I give, she can give. Any agreements I make, she co-signs. We operate as a unit. Understood? Heads nodded throughout the crowd. Some faces showed confusion. How had a maid become a partner? Others showed understanding. Clearly, this woman was more than she'd appeared. Good. Adrian stepped back from the microphone. The memorial is over. There will be no reception. You all came to mourn a dead man. Instead, you've witnessed a resurrection. Go home. Think about what you saw. Make your choices accordingly. He turned and walked toward the exit, Mara beside him. Mikhail's security opened a path through the crowd. Behind them, the ballroom erupted in chaos. Voices raised in shock and speculation, people pulling out phones, the news spreading at digital speed. Outside, a car was waiting. Adrian and Mara climbed in, and it pulled away from the Waldorf Astoria as police sirens began approaching. Too late, as always. That was dramatic, Mara said, a slight smile on her face. It needed to be. Fear is a better foundation than respect when you're rebuilding. Adrian watched the city pass by the window. Now comes the hard part. What's that? Actually following through, creating the new order we promised, making sure we don't become the same thing Viktor and Irina tried to be. Mara was quiet for a moment. We won't. because we know what failure looks like. We've seen what happens when power becomes more important than partnership. That knowledge is our advantage. The car drove them to a building in the financial district, an office tower owned through one of Adrian's shell corporations. The penthouse suite had been set up as a temporary headquarters, secure and anonymous. From here, they would begin the real work of rebuilding. Over the next 6 weeks, the new order took shape. Adrian and Mara operated as they'd promised, equal partners making decisions together, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Where Adrian had connections and strategic vision, Mara brought tactical precision and the ability to read people that came from years of invisibility. They met with Mikhail weekly, establishing protocols and boundaries, the division of territory held. A few attempts were made to test the new arrangement, ambitious mid-level operators who thought the partnership was weakness. Those attempts were dealt with swiftly and publicly enough to discourage others. Katya Volkova joined their operation, bringing exactly what Mikhail had promised: brilliant analysis and zero ambition to lead. She set up intelligence networks that gave them early warning on threats and opportunities. Within a month, they knew more about their own organization than Adrian had known in 15 years of running it alone. The 12 turncoats who'd worked with Victor were given a choice: prove their renewed loyalty through action or leave the city permanently. 8 chose to prove themselves. 4 disappeared quietly, smart enough to know when they'd lost. Adrian's legitimate businesses recovered slower than his criminal operations. The memorial stunt had made headlines, raised uncomfortable questions about his involvement in organized crime. Some corporate partners severed ties. Others stayed, attracted by the certainty of his survival rather than repelled by the implications. He didn't mourn the losses. Clean money was useful, but it had always been a facade. Now he focused on what he'd actually been good at: navigating the gray spaces where law and power intersected. 3 months after the memorial, Adrian and Mara stood on the rooftop of their headquarters, looking out over the city lights. The summer heat had given way to autumn chill, the air sharp and clean. "We've got stability," Mara said, reviewing reports on her tablet. "Territory disputes down 70%. Revenue streams restored to 85% of pre-betrayal levels. Working relationships with Mikhail's organization functioning smoothly. But," Adrian heard the unspoken reservation, "but this feels temporary, like we're building on sand again." She set down the tablet. "We've created a better system, a more equitable partnership, but we're still operating in a world where betrayal is profitable and loyalty is rare. How long before someone else decides we're vulnerable?" Adrian had been thinking about the same thing. They'd survived and rebuilt, had created something more sustainable than what came before. But the fundamental nature of their world hadn't changed. It was still built on violence and exploitation, still dependent on fear and calculation. "What if we change the game entirely?" he asked. "How?" "I've been talking with some people, legitimate investors who are interested in urban development projects in the territories we control. Real estate, infrastructure, business loans." Adrian turned to face her. "What if we slowly converted our operation, kept the power structure but changed what it's used for? Instead of drugs and extortion, we control development and opportunity." Mara considered this. "That's a 20-year project minimum, maybe longer. And it requires trusting that the people we've been oppressing would work with us as legitimate operators." "I know, but what's the alternative? Keep running the same criminal empire until the next victor comes along? Until age or violence or the law catches up with us?" Adrian looked out at the city. "I'm tired of building things that can only end in blood, Mara. I want to build something that might actually last." She was quiet for a long time, thinking through the implications. Then, "We'd need to maintain enough of the criminal operation to protect ourselves during the transition. Can't go legitimate while we're still vulnerable." "Agreed. We keep the muscle, the intelligence network, the enforcement capability. But we start redirecting profits toward legitimate acquisitions. Start building the next phase." Mikhail would need to agree. His territory would need the same transition, or we'd be creating a weakness he could exploit. "I'll talk to him. He's smart enough to see the long game." Adrian pulled out his phone, looked at the contact list, a fraction of what it had been before the betrayal, but more trustworthy. "We could do this. Actually change the nature of what we are." Mara moved beside him, looking out at the city that had almost killed them both. or we could fail spectacularly and lose everything we've rebuilt. That's always the risk. But at least we'd fail trying to create something better rather than maintaining something broken. She nodded slowly. Then let's try. Partners in rebuilding, partners in transformation. Whatever comes next, we face it together. They stood on the rooftop as the city moved below them, millions of people living their lives, unaware of the power structures that shape their opportunities and limitations. Somewhere in those streets, the next generation of ambitious criminals was learning the rules, planning their own ascents. But maybe, if Adrian and Mara succeeded, those future criminals would find a different path available, a way to build power that didn't require destroying others to maintain it. It was ambitious, possibly naive, definitely dangerous. It was also the only future worth building. 6 months after the memorial, Adrian Volkov stood in a real estate development office, signing papers that would convert a former warehouse district into mixed-use housing and small business space. Beside him, Mara countersigned as equal partner. The project was funded through carefully laundered money being put to legitimate use, the first step in a much longer journey. Across town, Mikhail was doing the same thing in his territory, having agreed that slow transition was smarter than maintaining their current model indefinitely. They were both betting on the possibility of evolution, of changing what they were before circumstances forced that change violently. It wouldn't be easy. Some of their own people opposed the shift toward legitimacy. Some of their enemies would see it as weakness and attack. The law would continue investigating, politicians would continue demanding accountability, and the world wouldn't suddenly become forgiving just because they'd decided to change. But for the first time since the night he'd returned home to Betrayal and Darkness, Adrian felt like he was building toward something rather than just surviving against something. The empire he'd lost had been powerful but hollow, impressive but fragile. What he was building now with Mara had the potential to be different, rooted in partnership rather than hierarchy, aimed at transformation rather than domination. That night, back at the headquarters, Adrian and Mara reviewed projections and plans. The work was endless, managing the criminal operations that still funded them, developing the legitimate ventures that would eventually replace those operations, maintaining the balance between fear and trust that kept their organization stable. "You ever miss the simplicity?" Mara asked during a break, both of them exhausted from 12-hour days that had become standard. "When it was just about territory and power? Never simple, just clearer." Adrian rubbed his eyes. "But no, I don't miss it. That version of this life would have killed me eventually, either literally, like Victor tried, or spiritually, by turning me into something I couldn't live with being. And this version? This version might actually mean something, might leave behind more than bodies and money." He looked at her across the desk they now shared. "That's worth the complexity." Mara smiled, genuine warmth that she still rarely showed, but that had become more frequent as the months passed. "Then we keep building. Partners until the end, whatever that end looks like." "Partners until the end," Adrian agreed. Years would pass. The transformation Adrian and Mara initiated would face setbacks and resistance. Some of their people would betray them. That was inevitable in their world. Some of their ventures would fail. They would make mistakes, miscalculations, errors in judgment that cost money and sometimes lives. But they would also succeed. Slowly, incrementally, they would convert their criminal empire into a legitimate development organization. The muscle would become security services. The enforcers would become project managers. The fear they'd once wielded would transform into respect earned through creating opportunity rather than exploiting vulnerability. It would take 15 years of careful work, constant vigilance, and partnership that never wavered even when tested by circumstance and temptation. But eventually, Adrian Volkov would attend city council meetings as a recognized developer rather than a suspected criminal. Mara would sit beside him, no longer invisible but powerful in her own right, respected for her strategic mind and unwavering principles. The mansion where everything had fallen apart would be sold, converted into a museum about New York's complicated history. The tunnels beneath would be sealed, the blood would be painted over, the memories would fade into the kind of story people told at dinner parties, dramatic and distant, real but disconnected from present reality. And Adrian would sometimes stand at the window of his office, legitimate, legal, clean, and think about the night he wasn't supposed to return. The night that had destroyed everything he thought he'd built and forced him to build something better from the ruins. He would think about Victor's arrogance and Irina's contempt, about the casual way they'd planned to erase him. He would think about Mara grabbing his sleeve in the darkness, whispering, "Stay silent," and how that moment had saved his life and changed its trajectory entirely. Most of all, he would think about the choice he'd made, not to disappear into safety, but to return and fight. Not to rebuild what he'd lost, but to create something new. Not to rule alone, but to partner with someone who'd been invisible until she chose to be seen. Those thoughts would remind him why the hard work mattered, why transformation was worth the cost, why partnership was stronger than power. And then he would return to the work, to the endless details of building something that might actually last, alongside the woman who'd turned silence into strength and invisibility into influence. Together, they'd become untouchable in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the foundation they'd built, not on blood and betrayal, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. The king had returned from death. The maid had risen to power. And together, they'd created something that neither could have built alone. That was the real ending to the story that began in darkness and ended in light. Not victory exactly, but something better. Transformation, partnership, purpose, and the knowledge that sometimes the worst betrayal can become the doorway to the best version of yourself, if you're brave enough to walk through it and wise enough to choose better companions for the journey ahead. The night Adrian Volkov wasn't supposed to return had become the night everything changed. And change, as it turned out, was exactly what had been needed all along.